Good afternoon. Welcome to the Beyond COVID-19 NOVA Business Resiliency webinar. I'm Colleen Cardez. I'm the Assistant Director of the Loudoun County Department of Economic Development, and I'm so pleased to welcome you today to today's episode or form of this webinar series, Keeping My Customers and Finding New Ones in This Climate. As part of the NOVA EDA group, I'm very excited that this webinar series is being offered to our NOVA businesses and looking forward to the discussion today. I'd like to turn the webinar over at this time to our moderator, John Jacobs.
Great, thank you, Colleen. Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll take us through a quick agenda, if I may, to get us oriented. And that was Colleen Cardez, we just heard from Assistant Director of Economic Development in Loudoun County, Virginia. I am John Jacobs. I'm the moderator for this session and for the entire series, Beyond COVID-19. We're joined by a great panel today, and they are David Goldberg, President and CEO of Cadence Education, Augie Ray, Vice President, Customer Experience with Gartner Research, and Benjamin Portman, CEO of Orpheus, a web development company based in Virginia. I will do as I do every one of these webinars and provide a quick update of stats. We have context to this conversation and to the situation that we currently find ourselves in. As you all know, over the last almost 2 months, we've seen $500 billion in COVID relief funding approved through the federal government. This includes the $310 billion in the second round of the Paycheck Protection Program. Of that, about 1/3 or $100 billion remains available from the second round funding, which is a vast improvement as far as perhaps a slowdown in securing those funds, but those funds remain available. Last Friday, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a $3 trillion additional relief package. However, it does not seem likely that it will pass successfully through the Senate. Unemployment filings as of this morning, as reported by both the Wall Street Journal and Department of Labor, have risen to 38.6 million filings. This is an increase of 6.6 million over the last 2 weeks. The current unemployment rate stands now at 14.7%, according to the Labor Department. The U.S. economy in the first quarter, as I've noted earlier, shrunk by 4.8%. That's on an annualized basis. Q2 forecasts range from a 30 to 44.5% contraction of the U.S. economy, again, annualized. However, there's year-end activity, there's the second half of the year, there seems to be a rather buoyant view, perhaps, of coming out the back end of this crisis. The Conference Board reports that their forecasts say that the U.S. economy will have reached 96% of its activity as compared to the year prior in December of last year. Total coronavirus or COVID cases as of this morning, according to Johns Hopkins University, a worldwide 5 million. U.S. cases have reached 1.5, 1.6 million, and U.S. deaths have reached 93,439, which is an increase of 20,008 over the last 2 weeks. I keep this last stat, and I've referred to it several times during this series. I like to keep it in our minds. As of April 14th, Gartner reported that 81% of the U.S. workforce is at least in part working remotely. This is a survey they conducted of HR managers. So as I mentioned, great panel, really happy, looking forward to hearing from these three gentlemen. Dave Goldberg, President and CEO, Cadence Education, Augie Ray, Vice President, Customer Experience with Gartner Research, and Ben Portman, CEO of Orpheus in Virginia. Dave Goldberg is the CEO of one of the largest early childhood education companies in the United States. Dave has over 20 years experience leading franchise, hospitality, and service companies, and specializes in formulating strategy, improving the customer experience, enhancing operations, branding, and launching new concepts. So Dave, I'd like to ask you to start sharing your screen so you can take folks through your presentation.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit here about Cadence Education and our challenges during COVID-19, which have been not insignificant. First, a little bit on our situation. Pre-pandemic, we operated 241 very high-quality preschools in 26 states, around 6,500 teachers serving about 35,000 children. Our portfolio includes 13 schools in Virginia, mostly in Northern Virginia, under the brand name of Wynwood Children's Centers. To add to our extraordinarily difficult and complex situation, our company was sold from one private equity to another. That sale was completed on March 23rd of this year. As I like to call it, it was the last deal in America. And that was a great benefit to our company, certainly our management team and our company in this time, because it gave us fresh debt and was a really important step for the company to make it through this pandemic. The impact of this pandemic has been dramatic for us. In March and through April, only 19 of our 241 schools remained open, serving mostly healthcare professionals, first responders, other essential service providers. We are starting to reopen our schools across the country, but very slowly. Once we close the schools, our 35,000 children served went to about 1,000 children served, and we had to furlough over 6,000 of our 6,500 employees, which is obviously very painful. So our operations essentially shut down. That created many challenges. First, and what we're going to talk about, and I'll talk about a little bit today, is challenges around customer engagement. For many of you on a call probably have young children, preschool age children, and so this will come as no surprise. There is no such thing as a virtual preschool. A virtual model is unavailable to us. And even local communication became very difficult because our staff, including teachers and our directors at our local schools, were furloughed. So big challenge to figure out how to keep our customers engaged and communicate with them. Other challenges, staff engagement. While furloughed, we need to communicate with them, let them know what's going on. We have new and rapidly changing health protocols that we have to follow at our schools. Temperature checking and cleaning procedures and limited capacity and group sizes. The federal government has been not wonderful about providing health protocols. They've left it, the CDC has provided some guidance, but they left a lot of it to states. And so we had to track 26 different states who have at times conflicting and unclear requirements on us. All during this, we had to start thinking about reopening. When are we going to reopen? What staff do we bring back? How do we deal with the limited capacity if more parents want to come back than we have room for? A lot of issues which challenge with. Obviously, cash management. While your business is generating no revenue, you got to be careful about what you're spending. And then to top it all off, we have a new ownership group that we're just building relationships with. So I would say that this was among the most, no, not true. This was the single most challenging thing we've ever faced in our business, and I've ever faced in my career. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing to address that. First, in customer engagement, we've been very, very diligent about communicating with our customers. I'm sending essentially bi-weekly emails, explaining to them what's happening with the schools, when we're planning on opening, how we're making those decisions, what our health protocols are, how we're going to keep their children safe. It's always been a very important part of our business that we provide parents with peace of mind as we're taking care of their children, even more important now. We have some employees who are remaining not furloughed, who are responding to parent emails and phone calls. And so we put together a team to do that. We put together another small group to work our customer relationship management system. Because believe it or not, we're still getting questions through that, and we're getting questions about new enrollments, and we don't want those customers to go unresponded to. So we had a small group of employees, and we had to set up procedures to sort of centralize that, what typically happened at the schools. And we started doing fairly regular customer sentiment surveys to give us a better indication of when parents felt they were going to be ready. When states allowed us to open isn't really the only determinant. We also wanted to be sure that customers were ready to come back before we opened the doors. Similar, and so very important to stay engaged with your customers. One thing I didn't mention, I should have, or it's down a little further. We put a lot of our curriculum and activities online for parents. Just keep our name in front of them and to give them something to do with their children, give them good activities to do with their children. We posted them on Facebook weekly. We emailed them out to parents. And really this is to help customers with what was a pain point for them, which is how do I keep my child, my 4-year-old busy all day long? We found this frequent customer communication and this online activities to be really valuable. Our customers have given us extraordinarily high marks. We score generally very high on NPS. We take great pride in our customer satisfaction. And I think this situation has actually strengthened, in some cases, those ties as customers have become very appreciative of how we've communicated with them. Another really important part of our efforts to communicate with parents is our communication with staff. We need to communicate with staff regularly for the same reason. Let them know what's going on with our schools, when they're going to open, when their job's coming back, what their benefits look like, how they can get unemployment help, other resources available to them. We've done that through emails. We've done that by setting up an employee helpline for them. We actually paid for their benefits while furloughed in the month of May to relieve a huge pain point for employees. This was a really important thing to do, not only for staff engagement, but because in our business, the staff is, there's a very strong informal network between staff and the parents. They talk to each other, they're friends on Facebook. And so if we're not communicating with the staff and we're not making the staff happy, that's going to get back to the parents very quickly. And then last but not least, we have some shifting and new opportunities, with summer camps closed and maybe elementary schools closed in the fall. Our school age business, that's for elementary school businesses, we think has an opportunity to grow. Other summer camp options won't be available and parents will want to have a more educational experience for their children this summer. So we've been working on marketing and expanding our summer camp program for this summer. And we run a number of private kindergarten programs, and we think there's going to be a big demand from parents who aren't quite comfortable sending their children to a public kindergarten or who think their children might not be ready because their learning has been interrupted. And so during a pandemic, to orient a team towards new growth opportunities has been a very interesting and unique challenge. So we've faced our share of challenges, but our team's risen to it. Benefits of, it's hard to build a team during a pandemic. You gotta, you always know a crisis is gonna happen. And the most important thing you can do is build that team before a crisis happens. Because if you're doing it when a crisis happens, it's too late. Same thing with your relationship with customers. Those relationships have to be built before a crisis, because if you're trying to build it during a crisis, it's too late. John, I'm gonna turn it right back. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to you.
Great. Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Dave. And I'll just take it here. Wow, your clients, your staff have been through a whole lot, and it sounds like you've really hit the ground with a successful focus. Next, I'd like to introduce. Let me just add. I should have mentioned at the top of this webinar Q&A. So we are taking questions throughout this webinar. If you mouse down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A tab, a button. Just go ahead, click on that, and start asking questions as they occur to you of all the panelists and of Colleen as well, who will rejoin us at the end of the presentations. So now let me introduce Augie Ray. Augie is Vice President of Customer Experience at Gartner Research. His coverage topics include ROI for customer experience, CX, customer experience strategy and governance, and how customer experience leaders secure and retain sponsorships and advocate on behalf of the customer journey. Prior to joining Gartner, Augie was in senior positions on customer experience positions with American Express and with US So Augie, I'll ask you to please start sharing your screen as well, and I will stop sharing mine.
All right. I think I am sharing my screen. Everybody seeing it?
Just one segundo. Let me see here. Yep, I've got it. Yeah, thank you. Please go ahead, Augie.
Very
You
good.
bet.
All right, thank you all for the time today. So at Gartner, we are doing some coverage, obviously, of COVID-19, what it means to business. My team in particular focuses on what it means to marketers, and I'd like to share a bit of data and information that hopefully you will find very helpful. So one of the things to notice is that over time, it will come as no surprise to you that there has been a lot of shifts in terms of what people are concerned about. So here you see 3 columns representing mid-March, mid-April, and early to mid-May. And one of the things you'll note is that 2 things were in the top 3 spots pretty consistently, and that is me or my family getting sick and the US economy. Those were the things that people were concerned about. But what's interesting is that other things have started to shift around, right? Early on, you saw some concerns about being able to get product availability in store, and that's begun to fall considerably. Replacing it, again, probably no great surprise, but you begin to see a shifting in terms of concern about US unemployment rate. It wasn't even in the top 10 concerns in mid-March. It began to appear in mid-April and has risen a little bit even since. And so one of the things that we talk to our clients about is the need to pay attention not only to third-party data of the sort that Gartner has and shares, and I'll give you a link in a little bit that you can use to get some free data yourself, but also your first-party data. What do you need to do to be able to, sorry, my phone is ringing and I'm going to hang up. All right, my apologies for the interruption. But also your first-party data. How are you listening to customers? How are you getting data from your employees? Are you using your survey capabilities, et cetera? Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that not only, of course, are all attitudes changing, but we are beginning to see disparate impacts. And that's really important to businesses because as we advise our clients, you want to be able to begin to focus on whether you're in B2C or B2B, the very different situations that your customers and your clients find themselves in. So again, here you see income segments. And while every income segment, once again, is worried about their family getting sick in the US economy, you can see some really startling differences come out. At the lower end, people who are in households with under 50,000, you can see a lot of personal concerns about price gouging, about product availability, about prices going up, some very personal concerns about shopping and the ability to get things that people want. At the high end, of course, people are somewhat less impacted by this. In fact, you probably saw some data this week from the Federal Reserve that indicated that people in more affluent households were much less likely to have encountered any disruption to the job or income. And so here you see that there are really more concerns that are oriented to supporting neighborhood businesses, the global economy. Unemployment rates a little higher as a more of a global concern. And so the message here is that you can't really have a one-size-fits-all strategy to your marketing or your customer experience. In more typical times, we see more than in typical times, we see a really wide variance in individual need, whether that's at the consumer side or the B2B side, and that really requires you to do more listening, to capture more data, and to be prepared with a wider range of offers and features and messaging and concessions and the like. Now, I mentioned that we had some free data. You'll see a link at the bottom here. It's a bit.ly link that you may be familiar with as a shortener, bit.ly/Gartner COVID. And what this will bring you to is a free consumer concerns tracker. You can see across the top that you can look over time. There are different date periods, but we also have a drop down for you to be able to get information by gender, household income, parenting status, and generation. So you can continue to monitor that. We'll be going back to our consumer panel regularly and updating this data, and that can be one of your sources of information. So far, so good. Now, in our work with clients, one of the things that we also are beginning to talk to them about is the need to develop scenarios. Right now, what we're seeing is a fair bias toward optimism. We all want to be optimistic. We all want things to return quickly. There are some reasons that you may need to be a little more cautious, though. This is some data that comes from late April, and it shows that really across a very wide range of consumers, that people are really still concerned about the risks of going out. So there may not be a rapid return to physical locations. And the thing that we find interesting is that while we can speculate about whether or not this will change rapidly or whether consumer attitudes will change, we also do have a canary in the coal mine to monitor, and we're continuing to do that. And that's China. China began opening up slowly and in phases starting in mid-February. And so we can see what they're going through in advance of the US and the West. And there's some really interesting things that are going on here. On the one hand, consumer confidence is remaining very strong, probably much like the United States. And there was some quote unquote revenge buying noted, the idea that people had this pent up demand and given the opportunity they went out and spent. But the thing is that it wasn't very broad. It was really in very specific sorts of categories like luxury goods. More broadly, digital habits are continuing in part because physical shopping and spending behaviors are remaining suppressed in China. They're coming back quite slowly, and you see some of the data here. As of early April, 40 to 60% of consumers are spending less than half of their pre-crisis levels in store, outdoor entertainment, and dining out. And even foot traffic is remaining really slow. 8 weeks after stores were reopening, only 28% of retailers were reporting foot traffic at more than 70% of pre-level crises. Now, this last bullet point is something we have to also consider. As you begin to think to the future, right now we seem to have a hand on this first wave. With luck, it'll be the only wave we have, but we don't know that. And one of the things that we can see happening in places like China and South Korea is that even after loosening some of their quarantine or stay-at-home rules, they've still had to take some steps back. China has re-implemented some quarantines in specific areas. They first allowed places like theaters and gyms to open and then dialed that back and asked them to close. And so one of the things that we must look forward to is some uncertainty, that we don't know what will happen in the future. Will there be a second wave in fall? What will its implications be? Now, the thing that I always say when I'm talking to my clients is that it's not my job to urge you to be pessimistic or optimistic, either way. But what we want to be able to do is begin to think about the scenarios that we face moving forward. What we've been doing with our clients is talking about not just the idea that we were in crisis and now we're going to move to recovery, but that we were in crisis, we're moving into a period of uncertainty, and that recovery will come in the future. And this uncertainty is going to be around employment. This uncertainty is going to be around consumer spending. It might be that in some of the regions that you serve, that some of them are open and operating or more open, and some are closing. In the way that the US was struggling at a time when, for instance, South Korea was open, we might expect to see the same thing even within the US market. It might be that, you know, say a Dallas or a Phoenix might be struggling to contain a surge at the same time New York might be improving, or vice versa. That's the point of uncertainty. And so as you can see here, we're talking to our clients that are more in the B2C and the B2B about why there might be this crisis, uncertainty, and recovery period and what they might be like. The marketing department sphere here is meant to be an organizational thing. What are your budgets? What are the disruptions the company might be facing in terms of supply chain? These are things that might force you to think about different scenarios. And also ultimately the broader culture. You know, what is the mood of the country, and what are people feeling, and how does that have an impact on your business, on your marketing, on your messaging? These are some of the things that we continue to talk to our clients about. So that is a framework that we've been using. And the way to use it here is we talk to marketers about creating their own grid, much like you see here. And this is just an example, but you know, think about budgets, think about your media, your messaging. What are your social media strategies? How might they change? And again, don't just bet on one scenario. If you have one optimistic scenario and things shift and you aren't prepared for it because you didn't plan for other scenarios, that reduces your ability to be agile. I had a conversation with a bank a couple of weeks ago. They talked about wanting to shift to more optimistic messaging, and that's great. Go ahead and do that as it appears things are opening up. But I said, what happens if in your region, and they happen to be in a region that is still near peak, has not turned down very much. And I said, what happens if, in fact, you need to re-implement in your state or in your city some stay-at-home rules? And they realized they wouldn't be prepared for that if they only committed to a more optimistic messaging. So they're beginning to plan for a more optimistic and a more pessimistic plan. They're going to have content ready for both. They're going to have their social media posts ready for both. And that way, depending on what happens in the future, they'll be prepared for anything. So by very quick summary, and then I'll give things back up to my peers here. Agility comes from being prepared. We have to get out of this reaction mode that a lot of companies and people have been in, and that demands that you think about different scenarios. You need to be able to listen to your customers more, think about the surveys, think about talking to your frontline employees, think about talking to actual customers. Think about prioritizing. You all have high value segments and lower value segments. You're also going to have people who are struggling and clients or customers who are not. And think about putting that into a grid. What do you do for high value customers who are struggling? And what do you want to do, if anything, for low value customers who are struggling? And so you can begin to match your strategy based on the value of the segments and the amount of disruption or struggle that they have. And finally, make sure to bias toward action. We've seen a lot of messaging on TV of brands that say that they care about their employees and about their customers. And you want to make sure that your actions match what you're putting into your marketing. We're worried that some brands will face risk from something called COVID washing. It's the idea of greenwashing that you might be familiar with, or pink washing, but it's where you adopt a communication strategy, but you don't really walk the walk. So make sure that you lead first with actions, that you really do care for your customers. You really do allow your employees to have protection before you take to the airwaves with an ad budget to say that you're doing these things. So thank you very much for your time. I apologize for moving so fast, a lot to go through. I hope you found that useful.
Great, it was great. Thank you, Augie. Thanks very much. And so our next presenter is Ben Portman. And let's go here a sec. I need to be more nimble in how I move around my screen. So Ben Portman, CEO of Orpheus. Orpheus is a web development company. And Ben, I'm sorry, are you in Vienna? Where? No, you're in
Reston.
Virginia. Where?
Reston.
You're in Reston. Okay, great. Thank you. And so Ben, he's the CEO of this company. He established in 2015. Prior to that, he's held technology roles in engineering with Intivia, Ellucian, and Smartronics. And then he moved in to start his own company, in part to help leaders, corporate leaders, advance their game on digital enablement. So Ben, why don't you please take and share your screen and then take us through your slides.
Sure thing. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we got you.
Thanks, John. Thanks for that really great introduction. And hello, and thanks to everyone for the opportunity to speak to you today. As John mentioned, we are a web development company. And so naturally, this presentation slideshow is a website. And there are links to the examples I'll be showing you. So if anyone wants to check it out, I'm going to paste the link in the chat. And I'll paste the link in the chat at the end. But the link is right here if anybody wants to check it out. So I'm going to use this opportunity to highlight some ways that we've found that we've been able to help our customers take their websites and web presence to another level. Ultimately, using the web more effectively is one of the best things any business can do to get new customers and keep their existing ones. This was true before the pandemic, and it will be doubly true after. I'm going to approach this from a crawl, walk, run perspective so that no matter where you are in the evolution of your web presence, there will hopefully be something here for everyone. First, crawl. For crawl, I'm going to talk about how to make a great first impression with your website. For walk, I'm then going to shift into talking about some ways that you can use your website to automate customer interactions and increase conversion rates. And finally, for run, I'm going to talk about how a more mature business can centralize all its operations in a single web app that connects to everything. So learning to crawl on the web entails successfully making a connection with web visitors in a matter of seconds. Research has shown that web visitors will bounce or leave your website in a matter of seconds if they aren't engaged successfully by their initial impression. So at Orpheus, we advise our customers to submit their website to something called the grunt test. This is a term coined by a marketing firm called StoryBrand. And according to the grunt test, you have 5 seconds or less to convey to your web visitors what you have to offer them, how it will make their lives better, and how they can buy it. So jumping right into some examples, and I'm going to point out some key elements that we think are the most important first things to get right if you want to be able to pass this grunt test. And these are the hero title, a 3 to 12 word title that sums up the value you offer, achieve your goals with TFP, a hero image, and this, you can go a lot of ways with this. In this case, they went with an image in which it shows their customers in transcendence thanks to their guidance. So as you can see, the hero image here pairs really nicely with the title. The man in the image is achieving his goals in life thanks to the financial freedom that TFP affords its clients. And then of course, the call to action is a prominent button, form, or just the most important thing you want people to do when they get to your site. Learn more, shop, explore. Here's another one in which case the hero image is just an image of the product, a very nice looking image of what they offer, and the hero title just states kitchen and bath remodeling, and that's totally fine. In some cases, it's not always critical to have all three. In this case, the hero image and hero title were more than sufficient. This one's interesting because the hero image shows a first-person view of the domain over which this law firm offers power to its clients. So I think that one's pretty cool. So anyways, nailing these elements will go a long way toward making your website more effective. Visitors who clearly understand upon arrival what you have to offer are more likely to engage with your website, explore its content, return later, and become paying customers. Walking, well, once you can crawl, you learn to walk. There's a lot you can do to use your website as a hub for more of your operation. What actually makes sense will depend on the nature of your business and how you interact with prospects and customers. I'm just going to touch on a few examples of ways to incrementally improve results using smart forms and workflows. So first, a landscaping company had a web form for online checkout in which the user would enter their address on the first screen and they would get a price based on their property size. They asked us to integrate this form with a satellite imagery service so that visitors could get the validation of seeing their house and yard during the checkout process. So we worked with the imagery service and we wrote a custom WordPress plugin to load images from 5 different angles after the address is entered. So they can cycle through the images and they also see them again on the last page of the checkout process. So just a little automation goes a long way. It can vastly improve the user's experience and hopefully lead to a higher conversion rate. So a little bit of more simple example. This is just something that we had with our onboarding process at Orpheus. I was sending each new client this email with key data points that we needed from them to generate their contract. So business name, address, everything we needed. But it finally occurred to me that the whole process could really be streamlined with a form on our website, obviously. Instead, we now send them this link. So it's similar email, but it just sends them a link, and then it takes them to this form, which is the same exact thing, except for it's a bit more of a guided experience with a little bit more information. And then when they, on what's needed and what's not, for example, and then once they complete it, I get this nicely formatted email with everything that they entered, and they're then automatically redirected after they complete the form to this thank you page, which also has payment methods and information on other next steps. So now I save a few minutes each time that I can now spend doing deep work, and our clients get a just slightly better overall onboarding experience. It's graphical, sophisticated, and automated, giving them a greater confidence that they made the right decision to hire us for their project. So using smart forms and workflows is a great way to further improve the experience of your prospects and customers. People want to work with businesses who have their act together, and that includes having their web presence set up in smart, sophisticated ways. So, okay, now how do you take that to a whole other level? If you string a few of these improvements together, a bunch of these improvements, they're all going to add up and to a much bigger improvement. But there is a whole other level that a mature business can achieve, which I'm going to call running for the purposes of this presentation. And that is to centralize all your operations in a single app. So this could be an off-the-shelf product, a CRM like Zoho or ConnectWise, or it could be something that your business commissions a developer like Orpheus to build from scratch and integrate with all your various business software. So the necessity, whether you're going to need a custom solution or something off the shelf is going to work, is really going to depend on how your business operates and what your specific needs. But yeah, an app that connects to everything is a one-stop dashboard for your business. All your employees, customers, prospects, and vendors can all use it to interact with each other, see important updates on work in progress, timesheets, invoices, communication history on support requests, anything you can imagine centralizing and granting people a login to access securely. It would make sense at some point to pursue. So a business that has implemented such a central dashboard will effectively be able to operate just that much more efficiently than one that hasn't. They'll be able to scale seamlessly and of course get new customers and keep existing ones with ease. So in conclusion, and then I'll pass this back to John, I've touched briefly on the crawl, walk, run of keeping your customers and attracting new ones with your web presence. For crawl, I talked about how to make a great first impression with your website by passing the grunt test. For walk, I showed you some ways to use your website to automate customer interactions and increase conversion rates. And for run, I touched on how a more mature business can centralize all its operations in a single web app that connects to everything. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions during the Q&A.
Great, Ben. Thank you very much. And now, folks, we've received a bunch of questions. And so I would, again, encourage you, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you will see Q&A tab. Just go ahead and start populating questions there. It can be addressed to any of the panelists, Colleen as well, who will rejoin us. Let me kick off, if I could, with Dave. You made the point toward the bottom of your presentation about the relationship between your staff and the clients, your staff and the customers, and that it was is critical to your business to be able to use your staff as advocates to your clients. Can you just go into a little bit more of that? How do you maintain, if you're not delivering the service, how does that play out?
Well, the reality, John, is it plays out informally and it plays out without us being involved. And there's, even if we wanted to or tried to get in the middle of that interaction, it wouldn't be possible. You know, we have a very unique business that we see our customers twice every single day, a drop off and a pickup. And not only do we see our customers twice every day, but the local school and the teachers see the customers twice a day. And, you know, these are very important relationships that the teachers and the directors have with families. Like I said, they become Facebook friends. At times they develop social relationships. And so it's not for us to get in the middle of that or try to influence that. It's for us to recognize and understand that that's happening. Look, I think it's a smart business. It's smart business to keep your customers happy and engaged with you, and your staff happy and engaged with you. In our business, it's even more important because if our staff is not happy and engaged, neither will the customers be. And so, you know, to answer your question, I think that during COVID-19, it's become even more important that while we've taken the drastic step of furloughing our employees, which could really turn them against us, and that could have blowback for how the parents feel about us and how our business gets back up and running. We don't think there'll be blowback. As a matter of fact, we think it'll go the other way, and that's what we've heard from parents. Staff is understanding that we are not able to continue to pay salaries when there's no revenue coming in, but we've gone above and beyond and giving them each 3 weeks worth of pay when we furloughed them and paying their benefits in April and May. And those steps were really well received, as well as just making sure we had continual and open communication. That's made the staff understand the situation and continue to feel good about us. And when they're talking to the parents, they're saying, you know what, this is a really good company. It's a tough situation, but they've stepped up and are helping us and doing the best they can for us.
And what the audience doesn't know, but through our conversation, your company was not eligible for the PPP program. Is that right?
No, yeah, that's right. So, you know, Congress does some strange stuff at points. So the PPP program, understandably, we're private equity owned, and the PPP program was focused on businesses with 50 employees or less. Obviously, we have 6,000. They did create an exception for restaurants and hotel businesses that if any location had less than 50 employees, they'd be eligible. Now, why during this pandemic, restaurants would be more important to receive funds like that to make sure, you know, to help them survive this rather than childcare. I would argue that childcare, for a lot of reasons, is much more critical to economic recovery than restaurants or even hotels. But, you know, we weren't eligible, so, you know, we do the best we can in managing our cash, and we would have loved to provide that benefit to our employees, but we can't, and so we do the best we can and, you know, move on.
Great. Augie, Dave in his presentation mentioned NPS, Net Promoter Score, and of course that's amongst marketers, that's a commonly known tool. So maybe you could, not fair to ask you, but to talk about the Net Promoter Score, but really talk about advocacy and sort of keeping your customer experience positive despite what Dave's company is going through, which is a virtual shutdown. So maybe you have some lessons or wise words to share with folks.
Yeah, well, it goes without saying that this is a challenging question to answer, and part of the challenge is that as somebody who serves a lot of different clients in a lot of different categories, they're in very different situations. We've adopted some language that you will find immediately intuitive, the idea that companies are in a spotlit sector, a shaded sector, or a dark sector, right? There are groceries, there are e-commerce, they're doing great. Those are spotlit. In the dark side, obviously, travel has been really impacted. It sounds like David's organization is dark now and hoping to to become shaded, right? And the idea is in these very different situations, you're going to need to use different strategies in order to meet customer expectations. What we're hearing from our clients and from some of the voice of customer vendors in the space is that most customers, as David mentioned, are inclined to understand that we're all going through challenges and are being quite patient right now. But one of the reasons why we developed that three-phase approach of crisis, uncertainty, and recovery was to get people to begin to think about what might be a very extended period of uncertainty. I mean, we've all heard, there's some optimism, maybe we'll see a vaccine this year, but we've heard experts say it might not come till next year. And so we might be in a period where we're combating the disease and the virus for some time. And some of the things we're hearing from our clients is that their first initial knee-jerk reaction of paying employees more who are frontline or giving discounts or waiving fees were sort of designed with the idea that we go through a very short period and then recover right away. Some of them are not prepared to do that on a long-term basis. Some of them can't. Their businesses are impacted just like their clients' businesses might. And so the idea of the uncertainty phase, and I mentioned the idea of prioritizing your high value segments versus low value, is to begin to think about the variation of experiences you can afford to provide. And without being unkind to anyone in particular, the thing is we are all going to be focusing on potentially thriving, but definitely surviving here in the next 12 to 18 months. And so the customer experience you want to provide, you might need to make some hard decisions about where to provide the best experience. And if so, do you want to spread it across all of your customers, or do you want to identify the customer segments or the clients that are high value and you need to keep and reserve the greatest flexibility, the greatest concessions for them? So one of the things we're helping our clients work through isn't just the idea of, how do you provide a great experience to everyone, but increasingly, what are the ways that we can begin to segment our population so that we can target better experiences to those clients, those customer segments that are going to help us best survive in this period of uncertainty and get to recovery in better shape.
Great, thank you. Just turning to questions now from the audience. There's one question for Ben here in particular. The question is, what type of positive feedback are you hearing from your clients who have modified their online presence during COVID-19?
Great question, John. Thank you for asking that. So first of all, making some sort of COVID-19 related page or announcement on your website is going to be something that you're going to want to do. Almost everybody that we've worked with has wanted to either have a page or an announcement at the top, something to at least acknowledge the situation. Some of our clients have put up pages that have all kinds of resources for their clients that relate to the pandemic, while others are they're closed and they have to announce that their physical location is closed or they're taking new safety protocols. So in terms of, I don't really have feedback from them in terms of what that has done for them necessarily, but I can certainly tell you that across the board there's been a desire by basically everybody to do something and be timely and show that they are responsive to the situation and use their website in that regard.
Great, thanks. And Augie, let me throw this one to you, but maybe Dave wants to jump in too. This is a question about changes to existing business models. And Dave, I suggested you as well because of what you're doing with your company. Augie, in your conversations with your clients, are you saying, gee, I got to have a new way to get to market? I've got to look at new segments. What kind of chats are you having?
In the early going, yes, we're having those conversations. We're only 2 or 3 months really into this pandemic, here in the US at least. And so a lot of it is pretty premature, but certainly we are seeing a focus over on the digital side. It goes without saying, as Ben discussed, those sorts of companies that are better prepared to deliver digitally or to deliver, period, as opposed to having people show up are better prepared for this. We're also having conversations with organizations about product mix. Like, people are beginning to think about what sort of products their consumers may want or not want. If you look at the retail data that's coming out in the US, one of the things you're beginning to see, for instance, is that apparel is down a lot. I mean, if we're not going to work, and if we may be working from home for some period, you begin to see some companies talking about potentially permanently, and there's a lot of buzz that, that a significant percentage of people who are working from home today will continue to do so. That will change the kind of clothing that we need. Some of us on this call may be in shorts. I'm not giving any names, but that's going to have an impact on the apparel. And so, yes, there's definitely discussions about thinking about, in this period of uncertainty, what will people need and how do I prepare for recovery?
And speaking of Dave Goldberg and his shorts,
I didn't use names.
I'm not saying anything. I got a button down on, and that's all anybody needs to know.
But so just very quickly recap the changes. You mentioned bringing in the kindergarten or the primary school program.
Yeah, so we serve mostly preschool age children, but we do have some before and after school programs that for school age or elementary school children. Our business model isn't shifting, and that's, in normal times, that's one of the benefits of our business model, is it can't be disintermediated. We're not at risk from an Amazon takeover. This is a service that can't go onto the internet. Having said that, what we think is going to happen here is there's going to be not a shift in the business, but a greater opportunity to serve school-age children because summer camps will be closed, other summer camp options won't be available, because parents want to get their children back to not only a fun experience, but one that has an educational bent to it. So we think our schools that offer summer camp programs are very well positioned for that. And then we also offer some private kindergarten programs. And for parents who have 4-year-olds turning 5, who missed out on their last bunch of months before elementary school of learning, missed out on the socialization opportunities that we provide, and who have health concerns, I think we provide a very compelling alternative to a public school. Small contained group sizes, a more nurturing environment, but still a very educational focus that can, put off parents who are concerned about sending their child to elementary school. They can put that off for a year and still make sure their child is getting a great education. Okay,
great. Colleen, a question for you. You're in Virginia. You're with the Economic Development Office in Loudoun County. You're on the ground, and you're interacting with a lot of B2B, B2C companies, certainly within your county. What are you hearing as top priority concern or your biggest challenge?
Sure. We've done an enormous amount of outreach since the start of COVID-19. Our office has reached out to over 2,000 Loudoun businesses at this point to talk to them directly. And I think a few weeks ago, we've seen a shifting of the concerns, which I think makes a lot of sense. So a few weeks ago, it was nothing but capital. The concern was, how do we stay afloat? And now as everybody makes that transition into, okay, the economy is going to open. We are going to get back to some semblance of a new normal here in the coming weeks and months. How do I prepare? And so I think it's kind of in tranches, with concerns about safety for employees, safety for customers, and how to rebuild consumer confidence. So that the conversation today is really resonating, is really at the heart of what businesses are concerned about. Our executive director has been saying, just because we open the economy doesn't mean the economy is open. It's going to take a long time. And so we've really talked to businesses about that kind of baseline good business practice, financial practices regardless, because we don't know how long it's going to take to build that consumer confidence. Not really. We don't know exactly when orders will be lifted, how this will happen, what each of the 4 phases for Virginia really looks like. And so setting that up and trying to make sure that all those options are available and that businesses are taking that into financial consideration has really been what we've heard is the most pressing need. On our end, in our office, we did a couple of things early on to try to help with that, which is, for our rural businesses, we launched an e-commerce platform and tried to open up some avenues to new customers for them. do some aggregation and distribution as well to try to help them get products to customers. We've done a dedicated marketing campaign called Take Loud and Home to try to encourage those businesses that could still operate for people to support those businesses. And then we're going to get into a recovery-based marketing program here soon. But really what we're hearing from the businesses is more substantial information on tools they can use, tasks they can take, and resources that are available to get to that physical opening and then get back up to full capacity, which is the unknown factor.
Great, thank you for that. And we're getting close on time, folks, but I want to throw one question to Augie, which has sort of been, it was intimated in the question here, but it's been gnawing at me as well. You talked about stages, Augie, and multiple scenarios. And but my question, and apparently somebody else's, is how do you know when you're in which stage?
So interestingly, I didn't have time to address that. We have in our research some categories of signals. We have struggled because, again, that spotlit, shaded, dark, you might be in very different situations. The signals for air travel are not going to be the same signals as retail shopping. And so we struggled with uniform signals, but we have categories that include things like what are the internal disruptions of your organization? What are the budget cuts that marketers are facing? That's one set of signals. The ones that more people think about are some of the socioeconomic signals and some of the consumer signals. What are people feeling? Some of the data I shared out of China that would suggest that consumer spending and behaviors will be suppressed. And so one of the things that we're finding is that our clients are trying to negotiate between people on their left and the right. And what I mean by that is that on the one hand, I had one client who said that literally one of his peers once a day steps out of his office and screams down the hall that it's the end of the world, right? There's those kind of people. On the other hand, we've got people who are like, no, the economy is going to be back. We're going to be back to normal in a month, right? And they're saying, how do I develop a plan that appeases all of my peers? And so we'll talk about the idea of have a scenario for both. That way they can all see that you're working toward their particular perspective and you're preparing for it. Then it brings up the idea of identifying the signals you need to tell you to move from one to another, or from one phase, from one scenario or one phase to another. And that if you can get consensus now as to defining the signals that will set you in one path or another, that ends the arguments. Now it's not about personal opinion. It's not about the latest news that comes from one source or another. You're bringing clarity to what you are following and is important and what isn't. So we see a lot of different approaches, but trying to get a handle now rather than remain agile and reactive is really one of the keys to succeeding throughout 2020, because it's going to be a difficult year.
Well, that's, I think we're running out of time. That's a good point to end on as well. Let me just, if I may, remind folks that this is part of a series, these webinars, and we're about a third of the way through. Next episode, next webinar will be on Thursday, June 4th, 2 p.m. Eastern, about business models. What are the new business models going digital? What does it mean for my business? Also, I would encourage the presenters, there are some very specific questions to several of you, and perhaps you can type those answers, and I'll keep this open longer past the top of the hour. The full list of these webinars can be found at novaeda.org, and it's listed here. These are the webinars, including today's, which we have conducted. You can find the webinars there. Also, I endeavored to attach presentations so that they can be sourced from that site as well. There's some questions of folks wanting to get presentations. So, and you can always follow up with me. My information is on the contact of Zoom. And thank you all very much. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Colleen, and thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.